Corn and soybeans breaking new highs this week, and yet price rationing possible for the early May futures. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. We are going to talk with Jerry Gidel. So Jerry, how are you today? So what are you seeing on the market? We are closing a week where we broke new highs for both corn and soybeans.
Well, it's one of those weeks where all the stars aligned. It looks like we've had some combination of various things here, and we've had some yesterday reports in the past. We've had some weather situations come in and things like that. But this week's we had a report last week and that, but the combination of things. This week really got things rolling as we took out some kind of interesting levels. Of course, the $6 level in corn and basically the $15 value in soybeans. So we've opened up some enthusiasm in these markets as people start scrambling as they try to figure out if they've got their ducks in a row here from both domestic processors and worldwide export U.S. exporting possibilities are actually importers overseas are looking at their supplies saying, oh, maybe this is the time we need to get some coverage.
Yes, and what are you foreseeing in terms of price rationing? Do you see that the first days of May will take place?
Well, I kind of think we got things rolling today or this week, to say the least. A combination of events kind of come in here over the last. I think we mentioned a little bit last week, and again this week there was definitely very very strong cash basis levels, which is meaning the relationship of the cash here in the U.S. People in the commercial world, soybean processors, ethanol. Biofuel operations. I don't know if we've seen much in the livestock side being aggressive out there buying things and that. The exporter situation, always a muted situation. They don't tend to show their hand too often. But in this case, we're talking some substantial numbers over. And these are for quantity. This is not just, little pittance at the elevator you got left to sell. They're not going to give you a big bonus from there. But they're basically the commercial world here in both corn and soybeans found people that felt like they needed to get a hold of some quantity as we were going. And the interesting twist on this, one of the things, the reason why that happens is that this time of year, as a producer gears up to go into planning mode, he doesn't really pay attention to the prices. He really doesn't want to stop planting something to get it on a timely basis to deliver corn or soybeans to an elevator or to an ethanol plant or something like that. So that's part of the game that's happened here is that the commercial people out there kind of know that. So that's part of the reason why we've seen some of this stronger cash prices being offered. Now you put the other thing that's kind of come into this thing at the same time is that we had the expiration of the May options, call-in and put options expire today. And so that says, oh, well, I'm in this market. If I've sold a call somewhere, this thing's getting crazy. I got to get out of here. If I'm in a put situation, it's going to zero, so who cares? But the same side of the thing on the long side, long calls, things like that. So we've got a lot of motions there. And then we put that together with next week's first notice day for the May contract. And that's one of the real talking points. If you're going to offer, substantial money here, 50, 60 cents over the futures, there's not really much logic that the person in the sell side of thing is going to take his uh, and deliver on the May contract. So actually what's happened is that most of the commercial bids at elevators around the Midwest have already shifted out of May to July here. My hometown did that same thing here in Western Iowa. And actually, surprisingly, uh, we're not in a very strong logistical location out there west of I-35, and they're not as far west as the feed yards and ethanol plants in Nebraska. So we're not in the world out there of having the strongest prices. We actually had bids above the July contracts on both corn and soybeans this week after they shifted out of the Mays into the Julys. And that is a very unusual and unprecedented situation. And so that really, the mental attitude of the cash and futures markets really got kind of wound up on those kinds of ideas that were going through the markets here. Plus, we had some great rumors going around about Chinese buying.
Have you seen any surprise on the U.S. export sales data?
Well, the surprise is that today is a good example. We heard rumors yesterday that China was interested in new crop corn. We didn't see a Chinese announcement today. We had a 336,000 ton sale of new crop corn unknown, but we have good imagination, so we think that matches. And the other thing that happened was we had 136 million, I think, a one cargo type lot of China actually buying beans, which wasn't really talked about. The one thing that did happen earlier in the week was the rumors in the wheat market of all places that China was interested in and actually purchased some European wheat for August and September delivery, 500,000, maybe up to 1,000,000 metric tons of wheat out of Europe in that. And so they get a logistical advantage for that wheat coming out of the Mediterranean through the Suez and on to China versus, getting wheat in the U.S. And to some extent, the wheat they buy traditionally is what I call noodle wheat. It's the white wheat of the Pacific Northwest. And that I think the wheat they might be buying from Europe is a little more feed directed. From there, it's a softer wheat. It's in general, they probably utilize both of the wheats in both ways. There's been continued talk and ideas and lots of consternation about the size of the sales they've made out of their reserves over there on wheat. The one thing that really bothers me, though, there's that nutrition and rational limit on the amount of wheat that you can actually feed to simple stomach animals. That's hogs and chickens. You're in that 20-25%. You're really pushing the world out there. And I know that one of the things that maybe was running around last week and even this week was, that the ag department in China recommended these rations and things like that. And the central and southern part of this, they're going to use their rice, they're going to use their wheat, that kind of stuff. That's a very interesting idea for people that are just building these new fancy buildings that are in a confinement world, and they're getting into the Western style of operations, and that you don't want to end up having pigs go off of their feeding rations and that, and you get problems with constipation, things like that. And I've needed to a little bit more discussions with some of my livestock nutritionist friends in that to get a little idea what might have occurred, might potentially could occur above that magic level of 20-25%. But I'm not sure there's a lot of room up there. Fiber is fiber, and it's good in animals' rations, but it's probably up to a point. Unfortunately, all of a sudden the whole system slows down if you get too much of it. So it'll be interesting if how that all gets worked out. I think that's the other feature in the corn right now. Of course, we've had a lot of different ideas and things going on here about how the world's going to go on. At this point, the activity we're going on in the markets right now, we're trying to get things trying to slow down a little bit on consumption. And that the one twist I did hear though is that surprisingly, in the midst of all this situation here in corn prices going up in the past, one of the things that happened is that the cost of ethanol got squeezed out of things. It just it didn't get a high enough price to be utilized, and we had a slowdown in ethanol production. We've had some higher prices back in the 2012-13. That was really also a scenario of food versus fuel type situation, and that's another twist of fate here. And it's not so much at this point in the ethanol corn issues. It's really switched over to the soybean world. How's that happen? Well, biodiesel and the whole world of commercial use of energy and that from big heavy trucks to over in the jet fuel, things like that. There's been a push over the last 6 or 8 years to use more and more of the recycled veg oil situations, also scenarios in that. But what's really got down to it is that veg oils have from soybean oil. And the one twist you got to remember in the ethanol world is that there's also a corn oil created out of the processing of ethanol. You get 2.8 gallons of fuel and you get some DDGs, but you also get some basically, I wouldn't say food grade, it's fuel grade veg oils that really looks really good in the world of diesel fuel. So, that's the twist of it that I think is subtly helping the ethanol industry stay afloat here, is that the veg oil side of their equation is a positive return. It's just not all DDGs. It's also their corn stuff, their corn veg oil generation, which is right now everybody's looking at all the different things that they can get out of processing and then try to keep enough margins in there for them to make some money.
Yes, and another thing that may be helping this market is the South American weather, I guess. There were some updates on the Argentine estimates, and yet I saw one report with Mato Grosso do Sul with 44% of corn crop under bad conditions.
Well, definitely there's the interesting thing, even in Mato Grosso, if you get north of Cuiabá and the northern sections of that state, and that things have kind of hung together there. You get south, you get down Rondópolis, you get on down to down to Mato Grosso del Sol and Paraná and parts of Goiás, and that. Not as much moisture there, and it's really had an impact on the crop there. And it's been 2 or 3 weeks, or someone actually said something might be a month that they really haven't had the moisture. And there's not a lot of moisture or much rain in the forecast for that area. Basically, southern areas in at least for Mato Grosso del Sol, Paraná, and parts of Santa Catarina, there's not much there, but on over into Minas Grandes, Goiás, definitely those are areas that there's, like you say, everybody, and I do myself, kind of concentrate all the Mato Grosso, or all of Brazil's safrinha corns in Mato Grosso or MT. Not the case. There's a lot in a lot of other areas, and that's a factor in this thing. We haven't. We're right on the cusp. We're going through that important period of time in Brazil, or any corn cycle. I don't care if it's just as it's getting close to pollination, through pollination, and then probably another 2 to 3 weeks after that. That's the impact of minimal moisture and heat during that period on corn. It just can be quite significant on its yield potential. 2018, we had a similar situation where the same southern area got beat up, and we had a setback of the crop of this 8 to 10 million metric tons. a couple year, 2 or 3 years earlier, I'm not sure it's 15 or 16. It was even more widespread, and it got, it was close to 25 million metric tons that got wiped out down there. Definitely don't think we're in that stage, but definitely if we lost 10 million metric tons out of this 109 that's floating around out here, this is a general idea. Psychologically, that could be the feature that prompt this market to go on to some of these $8 prices that we've seen in the past. But I can't say that I can point to that. And there is some rain possibilities pumping around, some chances, things like that. But we've got at least 3 weeks, maybe in 4 weeks before we totally know how badly this Brazilian corn crop is hurt. And we've had some issues over in Argentina too. From there, the beans and first crop beans down there definitely got hammered a little bit. Second crop beans will be better. Some of the same issues on the corn has got dinged up a little bit in that, but there has been a little bit better conditions in Argentina. But the one thing we've heard, and it just came out today, and you probably heard it right there in your neck of the woods, is that the agricultural minister thought that, boy, these prices are getting quite high. Boy, we might have to consider export taxes. Whoa, there we go. That's what we need. Shut down another exporter around the world. That's exactly what we need to, calm down the prices. If Argentina's decided that their internal prices are too high and they're going to do what Russia did, well, all of a sudden, then somebody else has to pick up some of those beans and corn that's in your export channels. So there's always somebody around the corner to give us a little bit of interesting news.
And let's remember that the last time that happened was in 2008 with a lot of turmoil and very high prices.
Well, yeah, that was an interesting one. 2008 was driven by the inaugural ethanol and energy market scenario, $150, $147 crude. We don't have that kind of thing going on with us this year. But the other thing is that the one thing we're running into right now is that I threw out the number, I think last week, that we 618 number on retracement here on these corn numbers, and that was in that 630, 635. Well, we went through that number from there. So maybe the next magic number is $7, which happens to be 75% retracement of the 2012 levels that we heard about against some of these last spring and summer prices, or last spring level prices we had in the U.S. That's a heck of a turnaround, isn't it? We were staring at our shoe back in March and April, and now we can't see the top at this point with all the emotions. Beans, same thing. We blew through those numbers on the 618, and actually we're up here with this 1560 zone that we kind of 1550 zone. We are up here at the 75% level in beans. So the twist of it is that you look at the history here of the world prices on, well, let's just say, right, Chicago Board of Trade prices. They're not totally world prices, but interesting. You go back and count how many weeks we've been above basically the $15 and 10 or 15 cent level, which is just a peak over it. We've been there 13 or only 14 weeks ever. That's pretty impressive, man. We are getting up at a very high level, so you got to keep your head on a swivel here. And the big driver of this thing, of course, has been soybean oil, and today's push up to 1650. There's only been 5 weeks. Only 5 weeks ever in the history of soybean oil prices in the U.S. that has been above this, and that's just up and down. I don't care if it's, these are only 5 weeks of time that you look at the chart, you point to the level, and you look at it and say, wow, it's been above this level. And so that's something you got to keep in mind. But the wildest thing that's happened this time around is that the U.S. and the world is so much more conscious of the smog issues and turning the energy world a lot more green. That's why soybean oil is going into diesel fuel. That's why we have ethanol going into gasoline. We're trying to, slow down this whole carbon issue. And this administration we have in the U.S. is a complete turnaround from where we were at on this issue, in the last 4 years. So it's got its front page news right now is the green revolution on keeping down carbon usage and carbon issues in the environment. And that's a big issue that's kind of been behind all these things. So we don't want to ignore the fact that, that things can get strong when everybody get lots of emotions about things like that. OPEC has had its run as, and it looks like green energy is a big factor in the U.S. agricultural prices.
I like your enthusiasm, Jerry. What do you expect for next week?
Well, it's going to be tricky because we've really run into some interesting levels. I kind of feel like we might be in kind of we've got a little rain projected for the U.S. coming through here, a sizable amount on Tuesday night into Wednesday, Thursday. And also there's a little bit of a rain event scheduled for some parts of Brazil next week. Now, I'm not sure that either one of them is going to save us from the standpoint of, oh, we've got a drought going in the U.S., or it's going to turn around and there's going to be a major change in the trend on weather in Brazil. But I kind of feel like maybe we get a little bit of a sideways situation in that. And I think the other thing that will drive this thing, though, is that the May USDA reports, and I think it's on the 12th. I think that's my number when they reissued that, and is going to be still a magnet for this market to try to stay together and see what the USDA comes up with for their early, and this is very early, their initial look at the world's 2021-22 crops. Now that does not include, the crops that are not even going to be planted until next fall in South America. And that it's their judgment about the logic right now. I think everybody's going to take a reduced Australian wheat crop, but I'm just saying is how we come up with some of our initial U.S. and world carryover stocks for next year. It's going to be quite interesting, and I think that's the reason why this market going to bounce around a little bit. But I kind of feel like it could find some legs and still stay together here, and maybe even push to new highs as we go into that report on May 12th.
Thank you, Jerry.
Always good to be with you, Lewis, and let's see what next week brings.